Welcome back. Hey, what's going on, geeks? Max is the Beast is here. Max is the Beast is here. I cannot English right now. Yeah, I'm here. Hey, folks. Max is the Beast is here. We're doing part 3 to reviewing and ranking Fortnite seasons live and on the air. So, where we last left off, I'm going to pop back over to our little tier list here. We had just finished ranking Season 8 and had moved on to Season 9. I hope to get through Seasons 9 and 10 in this stream, and heck, we might go even further than that. We shall see how we do. Alright, so, here we are on the Season 9 Fortnite map. So, a couple big things that happened this season were that after that big volcano event in Season 8, remember Retail Row and Tilde Towers and the base of Polar Peak got nuked. They were both hit by volcanoes, by volcanic rock, and destroyed, and were rebuilt into Mega Mall at Retail Row, and Tilted got turned into Neo Tilted. And as far as the other glaring map changes at the start of the season, there weren't too many other big POIs. There were some new facilities added on to the outskirts of Loot Lake here. The vault here was still exposed after that event. I mean, it had been exposed since like halfway through Season 8, but it stayed this way, and more facilities were gradually added on around the base of this vault thing. Additionally, as you will see here, there is a massive, these are massive like wind turbine things that extend all the way around the middle section of the map. This is the slipstream, which became notorious. You see, for those of you who want a refresher, people both love and hate items and contraptions that allow for people to easily escape. And the slipstream was a perfect escape tool, especially when you were in areas like Mega Mall or Neo Tilted that were directly connected to the slipstream. So all people had to do was, in some areas in Neo Tilted, I believe you could even like jump into the slipstream directly from some of the buildings, or you could oftentimes just build up to it. Like additionally, some of the buildings in Neo Tilted and I think Mega Mall had like air vent things that you could jump onto, and it would give you a little boost. You'd bounce in the air, and you could use those to... They were good mobility to get around the city areas and whatnot. And they would give you the same effects as like a shockwave grenade, or getting off of a modern zipline where you get a few invincibility frames in terms of fall damage. So after you jump onto one of those air vents, it would bounce you, and then you could jump wherever you wanted to without worrying about breaking your kneecaps on impact. The air vents there could do similar things, but oftentimes you could use those to bounce, especially in Neo Tilted where there was a lot of them, bounce directly into the slipstream and then fly away. This proved to be both a blessing and a curse for people, because again, it was easy to escape. There's a smaller slipstream around both Mega Mall and Neo Tilted, allowing for, again, easy rotation around the POIs, as well as easy escape methods. You could also glide from the slipstream in Neo Tilted to the larger one. Same case in Mega Mall, you could just glide from here to there, and then the rest of the map is yours to go around. And so it was an easy escape method, great for escaping fights early. You could also sometimes find like drift boards and the ballers floating around in the slipstream, so sometimes you just go face first into an unmanned vehicle and just take it from there. So that was cool. It was a good method of transportation, but it was also annoying sometimes when you get into a fight in these locations and then suddenly someone would just jump in the slipstream after you dealt like 90% of their health and they'd escape. Of course, you could still follow them, but you could also get third-partied or whatever, and that was never fun. But it was a good method of transportation nonetheless. Although it was much easier to cut off people who are trying to get in the slipstream. Like, let's say they're around the Dusty Divot area, they're coming up through here, and they're trying to like build up to the slipstream. It would be much easier to counter somebody doing that than somebody who bounces into the slipstream here at Mega Mall and flies away. But talking about the two new futuristic POIs, oh yeah, there's also Pressure Plant. I kind of forgot to mention that because it's kind of a forgettable POI, at least at the very start of the season. There was like a geothermal plant built into the interior of the volcano. It had some decent loot. It was a nice open facility, had good cover, had good vantage points, but it would consistently evolve throughout the season. And yeah, that was pretty cool. And before I was gonna just go ahead and jump straight on into the discussion on Neo Tilted and Mega Mall, but I've kind of gotten distracted. We have the pressure plant here and in Neo Tilted. My brain is having a stroke. Wowzers. Pressure plant here in the volcano. But around the map, there would also be these drone-looking things. These little air stations had wind turbine things similar to the slipstreams that you could use to glide up and down from the top of these little station things onto the ground and vice versa. They have some decent loot. And again, you could use the slipstream-esque wind turbine things to go up and down, rotate easy, escape, get glider redeploy, and fly someplace else. And they also had those air vent things I mentioned earlier that you could use to bounce off of them. They were decent little loot spots, and people at the time, this was when around the time Apex Legends was released, so people thought that they were directly inspired from Apex because Apex had a similar thing on their first map with these little air-based things. Additionally, another type of like mini event would happen every round at different POIs. This would be the hot drop, where one random POI would typically be a relatively hot drop like Paradise Palms or Pleasant Park. Sometimes Lazy Lagoon over here would get hit by it. The name of the POI would turn yellow, and when you drop there would be little Zeppelin-looking things floating above the POI that if you shot them down, they would drop pretty good loot. And depending on what color the Zeppelin drone was, would depend on what would dictate what tier loot they would drop. So if you shot a purple Zeppelin, you get purple loot. They were pretty good spots to get some pretty high tier loot early on. Although again, they are hot drops, which means that they were trying to inspire a lot of people to drop there because of the amount of loot you could get. And so that was that. Now, Neo Tilted and Mega Mall were relatively disliked by the community. It's kind of hard to replace the nostalgic feel of Tilted Towers, and same went for Retail Row. Mega Mall people viewed it as a shell of its former self, as a shell of what Retail Row was and was supposed to be. The mall itself, like personally, I thought the aesthetics of both of the futuristic places were cool, but I can see where people are coming from. My own personal experiences with Season 9 were, if you stuck around to the very end of the last time I did one of these, I talked a lot about how towards the end, like middle of Season 8, Fortnite was very, very finicky with my machine, where it struggled, my PC struggled to run it at times, which proved very difficult when trying to play because the frame rate would dip into unplayable levels. Sometimes locations wouldn't properly render in. There was one instance where my contrail wouldn't turn off, so I was running around the entire game with the lantern's contrail still active with lanterns popping out of my being wherever I went, and that was not very fun. So my experiences with Fortnite Season 9 were of a similar vein to how it was in late Season 8, like the halfway point of Season 8 and later on, where my computer just struggled to run the game, and the game was kind of buggy for me. I have never seen anybody else have those same issues that I did, and that's one of the reasons that drove me away from the game, is because I was having so many issues playing the game, and nothing I tried to do to fix it would actually do anything. So that was a very, very, very not very fun experience, and Season 9 was of a similar vein, where it was very laggy. My frame rate was all over the place. Sometimes locations wouldn't render in. I remember one game I dropped up at this pirate outpost near the volcano. My skin wouldn't load in. It took like 2 minutes for the surrounding area to render in properly. I launched myself in a cannon, which turned my contrail back on. And as I flew into pressure plants, my contrail was still active as I'm in this cannon spin. And after I landed, everything was just weird and buggy, and it was a bizarre round. So needless to say, my own personal technical experiences with Fortnite at this time were rather negative. I wanted to get into it, but the game was throwing every obstacle it could at me. Occasionally, I would get the opportunity to play a regular round with no weird, obscure issues, and the ability to actually sit down and play the game. I never won a game at Season 9. I never won a game in Season 8. I never won a game in Season 7. But every once in a blue moon, I'd be able to play Season 9 regularly without any of these obscure bugs or whatever happening. But needless to say, it was a very strange time, and I didn't really spend a lot of time playing the game during this point. But I did like the aesthetics of Mega Mall and Neo Tilted. I thought they looked cool. Again, because of these issues, I didn't drop there a lot, but from the community's consensus, they, from what I had seen in masses, I know there were some people who liked them, but there was a lot of hate towards these two new POIs. Again, partially because it's kind of hard to recapture what made Tilde Towers and Retail Row so special, and a lot of people thought that the weird futuristic stuff took away from the original charm of the POIs. But personally, I kind of liked how they looked. You know, Neo Tilted had a bunch of like holographic advertisements for the Fortnite companies, like the Durr Burger and Pizza Pit. Pizza Pit had another thing over here in Mega Mall. Mega Mall was just... It was a really well-designed POI, in my opinion. There was a lot to it. There were multiple shops you could explore. The outskirts here were essentially just your regular retail row type of a deal. The houses here were pretty similar to retail row. They were just your regular retail row houses with a little dock thing connecting to the slipstream here. But the Mega Mall itself was, of course, where the location would really shine. It was this massive mall, hence the name. And there was a lot of like little shops and Easter eggs, like those little baby Flush Factory that had been set up there after the name POI had been frozen over in Season 7. Flush Factory had a thing up here. There were a lot of really well put together shops, and then there were a couple that were just kind of there. There was a little toy store that just had a few teddy bears sitting on one shelf. There were a few shops in Mega Mall that were clearly... Epic clearly favored those designs over others, where sometimes you stumble upon a really cool looking shop, and then you'd walk right into one that looked rather unfinished. But overall, it was a sprawling location with a plethora of shops, some again better than others. And on the back end here, there was a little storage area that you could glide on into a little garage underneath the mall, which had a bunch of loot and was a relatively hidden little loot spot that not too terribly many people took advantage of. And then Neo Tilted, pretty much changed the layout of the city itself. There were some similarities, like the ball court was in the same spot, but a lot of the buildings had been changed around. The clock tower was still there, but there was also this massive little park in the center here with a statue of a character we had not met yet in the center of this giant fountain. But Neo Tilted was had a massively different layout than regular Tilted Towers. And it had a lot of areas we can kind of crawl into, go underneath. There was a few underpasses. It was a true futuristic city, and I personally thought it was really cool. But again, let me know if you guys remember Season 9, if you played during that time, what you guys thought of Neo Tilted, because personally, I thought it was cool, and if it ever came back in some way, shape, or form, I'd like to give it a second try, because my first go-around with it, I was barely able to play the game, so I'd like to actually be able to experience the POI in full, but from what I was able to see at that time, I personally liked the layout and aesthetic and whatnot. So that was really most of the major POI changes at the start of the season. Although eventually, I don't know when exactly. I mean, this is 9.00. I think this is what it was. But there was a John Wick LTM where an actual licensed John Wick skin was added, as well as a bunch of other cosmetics. And there was a full-on game mode for him called Wick's Bounty. And they added a little John Wick house in the desert region that had a bunch of loot, had a secret little basement area with a bunch of weapons. It was a good place to be. And this little spot stuck around for most of the season and was added for this LTM. I never got a chance to play it. I really wish I did, because the rewards for it were great. There was an absolutely sick umbrella specifically for the mode, as well as some of the challenges you could do would get you stuff like the Boogeyman Rap, which, while Stealth Black was added in Season 8 and looks pretty nice, I personally think the Boogeyman Rap was a cleaner design. It was a cleaner wrap. Like if I go over to the cosmetics here and then head into wraps, I'll show you guys it. Here's what it would look like. Here's the Boogeyman wrap compared to Stealth Black. So yeah, that was a thing. But as the season progressed, a lot of the weapon changes. The pump shotgun for a while was vaulted, but it was also during this time that the original bolt sniper came back, much to the joy of many people who were tired of, because for a while the only snipers you had, they unvaulted at one point the semi-auto, so you'd have the semi-auto sniper, the silenced bolt, and then the heavy. But then they vaulted the silenced and re-added the regular bolt, so you had the semi, the regular bolt, and then the heavy. And I think the hunting rifle came back at one point as well. But the pump shotgun was vaulted for a bit, leaving the tac shotgun, and then this new one they added called the combat. For a while, the combat was absolutely busted. It had a very tight spread, and it could be used at a decent range, doing quite a bit of damage even at medium range, making it effectively a shotgun sniper. And while they did use this idea of a shotgun sniper again in the future, they made sure to balance it out better. Whereas the combat shotgun back in Season 9, they did not balance the range on that all that well. It was really powerful. It had an insane fire rate, did a lot of damage. It couldn't one-pump people, unless they were under 100 health, at or under 100 health. But still, with how much damage it did and with its obscene fire rate, you didn't need it to one pump. It could do enough as is. Additionally, the drum shotgun was also added this season. While its base damage was relatively meh, again, it was a drum shotgun, which had a magazine capacity of 12 shots. It didn't matter how much base damage the thing did. If you could just hold down your left click on people and spray all 12 shots into them, you could shred them before they had an opportunity to think about it. So both the combat and the drum were pretty busted. The drum wasn't really used all that much, though, although the combat was pretty much your bread and butter of shotgun fights this season. Because of, again, its high fire rate and solid damage. The combat did receive some nerfs throughout the season, where its damage drop-off was improved, so you wouldn't be doing that much damage at medium range anymore. In close range was where you would be better off using the thing rather than the medium range as you could at the start of the season. So that they did fix the combat shotgun as time went on. And what else? See, ballers and driftboards stuck around in terms of vehicles. Oh yeah, they also added in an official purple and gold version of the TAC shotgun, which changed the model from the standard looking TAC shotgun into an upgraded version. Back in the day, there was a purple TAC back in seasons 1 and 2, but it didn't have a unique model. It was just the regular TAC shotgun, but of a purple rarity. Whereas in season 9, they gave the purple and gold pump back in late season 6, early season 7. They gave that a new model, and it was pretty good. The combat could still outclass it in areas, but again, the purple and gold tack wasn't anything to shake a fist at. It was a solid weapon. In terms of other weapon additions and weapon changes, not too much to say. The AK had been nerfed mid-season 8, and it didn't really get better. The heavy rifle remained consistent. It was really powerful in season 6 and 7, but by season 8 it got nerfed, and season 9 did not improve it. There was also the tactical assault rifle added, which was an AR that would take light bullets, had decent range, but had a decent damage drop-off at range, so it wasn't too overpowered at range, but it could still do some solid damage. But in terms of a lot of the weapon changes, I think that's all she wrote for weapon changes. The Battle Pass was another one that I regret not completing. There were several of them that I really wish I could go back and complete, because I were by. Because see, I didn't buy season 2 or season 10s at all. And I missed the completion of season 4, 8, and 9. That was not very fun because I really liked how Vendetta looked. That was a cool skin in my opinion. It wasn't the most liked tier 100, but I thought it was cool. I wanted it, but didn't grind out the game to get Vendetta, so I didn't get it. Battle Pass was alright. Had some cool skins. I am happy to get Rox, and I got a few of her styles, and different color options. So I am happy about that. I didn't get a pickaxe. They also introduced the dual wield pickaxes during season 9. Bunker Jonesy had one, and Rox had one, and I think Vendetta had one as well. And the secret skin was another really good one, and I, again, didn't get any of the Chapter 1 secret skins, and I'm very, 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 very upset about that, because Singularity was Season 9 secret skin, and that was a very good one, and I'm, again, very upset that I didn't get that. Rather than doing your regular challenges, though, as you would in previous seasons to get the secret skin, Season 9 introduced Fort Bites, where various sections around the map would have various requirements for you, and various challenges for you to complete there, which would result in you getting a Fort Bite, which would unlock various loading screens and whatnot, and also in the Fort Bite screen would showcase different concept art and things like that. It was a pretty cool aesthetic there too. But of course, it would also unlock the secret skin at the end of all of it, which was Singularity. And I am very upset that I did not get that. Once again, I either didn't have the foresight back when I could play the game regularly to grind out the secret skins, or by Season 9, again, my computer was just chugging trying to play the game, so yeah, that was unfortunate. But there was another really big thing that happened in Season 9. I don't know why... Woo. I don't know why 01 came after... That's weird. Not too many map changes throughout the season, until we got closer and closer to the end of it. Notice right here. I think it happened in 21. Nope, it happened in 20. Notice right here. The front end of Polar Peak, where people had noticed an eye in the side of the mountain after the volcano event. By 9.20, the top end of Polar Peak, the castle itself, had moved. This side of the mountain was gone, and as you can see, there are massive footprints in the snow leading into the ocean. This was our first sign. This was more confirmation, rather, because our first sign was the eye, but confirmation that something absolutely massive was alive at Polar Peak and was on the move. Occasionally, if you were fortunate enough, if you were looking on the outskirts of the island into the ocean, you could occasionally see the top end of Polar Peak floating around in the water. This was the first hint towards the upcoming live event. The map continued to change over time, kind of getting brighter, but not too terribly much was happening in terms of our major map changes here. Until Pressure Plant gets changed. You might be wondering, what happened here? Well, for the next few updates here, the next update, a massive mech would be constructed in the base of the mountain. And for a period of a few weeks, this mech would continuously be built and it would be painted over top of, representing a lot of the major Fortnite companies like the Durr Burger and Pizza Pit, as well as our favorite Fortnite icons like Rex, Drift, and Cuddle Team Leader. And eventually, this mech would be constructed to be used to combat against the giant Polar Peak monster. This would be that season's live event, where the Polar Peak monster, known as the Devourer, rose from the depths of the ocean on this side of the island, crawled in over top of the Lazy Lagoon area, destroyed a pirate outpost, and began wreaking havoc across the Fortnite map. The mech activated, being piloted by Singularity, and faced off against the monster in this area. After a close call, and then with the mech nearly destroyed, excuse me, it punched its way into the vault in the middle of Loot Lake, breaking it open and revealing the 0 point once again. After squeezing the 0 point, it punched the Devourer and then raised a statue out of the middle of Neo Tilted, revealing it as a sword, stabbing the Devourer in the head and turning its corpse into a massive skeleton that players could then explore. The mech then flew away, never to be seen again. Or at least, never to be seen again for a couple chapters. After this, in terms of Fortnite lore, the 0 point was exposed, was damaged, and caused all sorts of obscure time conundrums, which leads us into Season X. As you can see here, there are the footprints of the monster across the island here. You can notice them. It's kind of hard to see, but there was one up in the jungle area. And then a massive one here at the base of the vault. But this was the end of Season 9. This event was one of the community's favorites for a good reason. It was a truly epic event. But the next season would be far less popular, because Season X was an absolute conundrum. However, before we rank Season 9, of my lack of being able to actually play the game, but from what bit I was able to experience, I did have fun. Although I wasn't the biggest fan of the combat at first, although I did grow into it. But it was a very difficult season for me to play through because of the random issues that I personally experienced. Excuse me. So, looking at it more objectively as to what it did for the game, like the map changes, about the event, Battle Pass, thinking about all of that combined, I'm going to give Season 9 an A. It wasn't spectacular. There were some areas that, in my opinion, needed to be improved. The combat shotgun was absolutely insane and needed to be nerfed sooner, but it was fine. They nerfed it eventually, but again, for those first few weeks, it was a difficult time indeed. But that's my opinion. I'm putting 9 at the A spot. Now then, Season X. This one was a weird one. A very, very controversial season. I'm going to start with talking about some of the really positives for me. The Battle Pass for me was one of my favorite Battle Passes in Fortnite. And I am very angry at myself because at this time I was fully in the Fortnite hate train. I did not like the game. I did not have any interest in spending more money on the game. So I did not buy the Season 10 Battle Pass. And looking back, I am absolutely beating myself up over that because it had so many good skins. And my personal favorite from it being Ultima Night, which I am still so upset about that I didn't get. If people could ask me, if Epic asked me right now, hey, if he could give you an OG skin, a skin that would be exclusive from any of the former seasons that you didn't get from a battle pass, you didn't get from an item shop exclusive thing that you couldn't get, what skin out of all of that would you choose? I'd pick Ultimate Knight in all its styles because I really like it. It's really cool. I would main the thing, but I didn't get it. I didn't buy the battle pass, and I missed out on some really good stuff. Epic. If you end up listening to this, if you want to drop Ultimate Knight into my account, I'd be very thankful. And I'll never complain about anything again. I just want Ultimate Knight. Thank you. Please and thank you. I'm seriously debating making a joke video about that, but am I joking? Am I joking? Am I? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Who knows? Anywho. Additionally, some things I liked about Season X. There were a lot of really cool concepts, but in execution, those concepts kind of fell flat. So I'll give a lot of them. I like this in terms of their concept. I like their idea. It's just the execution of those ideas that kind of fell flat, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of others. So let's talk about the map changes. Season X, part of its theme was just the glitchiness of the Fortnite timeline at this point. 0 Point was exposed in the lore, causing all sorts of weird and wacky things to happen across the map. Additionally, parts of the map were reverted to their OG states. Most noticeably, the middle of the map here. Dusty Depot came back, as well as the original factories, and the meteorite that destroyed Dusty Depot was now suspended, floating in the air. Additionally, the Devourer skeleton had leaked out some weird, goopy stuff that changed the flora around this area into this weird pink color, and again, the skeleton itself was a massive location you could explore, and that was pretty cool. But this was one of my negatives here. The return of Dusty Depot and the original factories. Factories were fine, but Dusty Depot, why? The location was, back in the old days, was rather lackluster, and its return state in Season X was no different. There was very little loot. It was a very open space. If you dropped there, you'd often end up dead. Or if you survived, you'd walk away with next to nothing. Whereas people who would be dropping in other locations would easily outclass you. You'd be in the middle of nowhere, in no man's land, with barely anything, and you just get murked. The factories are fine, but let's be honest. Let's be honest with ourselves. We love the factories because of the OG status, because of their OG factor. The nostalgia was playing a part in that. Their loot was also relatively mediocre. Neither of these locations were all that good. We were just kind of blinded by nostalgia we were kind of sad that they were gone originally. But when they came back, we kind of were reminded that, oh yeah, these weren't as good as we remembered them. I preferred Dusty Divot over the depot and over the factories. You could get much more loot in the diner and in the little facility in the middle of the divot. It was one of my favorite spots, and I was, even though at this point I didn't care for Fortnite, I was still a little sad that one of my favorite spots in the game, just like Reese Grove, had been done away with. And the map changes only got weirder from there. Tilted got turned into a western town for a bit. And Mega Mall went back into Retail Row. That was cool, right? Well, that's part of Season X's gimmick. There was a lot of weird gimmicky things going on around the map. There were little things called rift beacons that showed up at random locations, at random named locations. And then, by the next update, the locations would change drastically and have their weird gimmicks going on. For Retail Row, the location was same as usual, back to its old self. Only alteration here is, though, that, well, now there were cube monster spawners everywhere. Yep, that's right. Retail Row is infected by zombies for some reason. And while the location itself geographically was the same, you'd be hoarded by zombies in that one city. This was Fortnite's first attempt of quarantining the zombies into one location, which some people appreciated because nobody wanted the zombies back, but at least the people had to deal with them, making them optional and making you choose to interact with them rather than having them all over the place and you forced to fight them. Giving the player the option to deal with the zombies or not was the right call, and Fortnite would later reuse the idea of quarantining them in future Fortnitemares events, as well as future times the zombies were reused. The zombies function the same as they used to. You kill them, you get shields and some basic loot. You destroy a pylon and you get some loot from that. The zombies were of the original cube variant, not the snow version we got during the Ice King event. And again, they were kind of generic. I don't know why they were there, but Retail Row was zombie infested for some reason. And Tilde Town was Fortnite's first attempt of the Zero Builds game mode. Just in a really early stage of it, and with more of a Western feel than the Zero Builds we have nowadays. Additionally, Tilde Town's motto was no building and no breaking. Every single item in the town was indestructible. You couldn't break through builds, and you couldn't build in there either. Any materials you collected were ground loot that you could pick up or get out of chests. And there was this giant purple sphere over Tilde Town that designated the area of where you could and could not build. This proved difficult. This proved obnoxious for many because sometimes this little radius was unclear of where exactly it wanted to be. Sometimes you could just get on the very edge of the sphere, and then suddenly you'd be in a massive build fight. You get on the very edge of this thing, and suddenly you're in a cowboy trench coat, and you can't build anymore, and you fall to your death. Or sometimes zone would force you to go, like, let's say zone is over close to these mountains over here, and you have to go through Tilde Town to get there. However, let's say you stalled while looting the middle Devourer skeleton over here. You stalled looting there, so the zone caught up to you. You're running through Tilde Town, and you hit the side of this mountain here, and there's no way up for you. You can't build over top of this mountain. You're stuck here. You're dead because of zone. Tilde Town was a really cool idea and could be fun, but could also be very, very obnoxious depending on the circumstance. So Tilde Town was kind of a controversial location. Could be fun, and was a location where you could get items like the pump shotgun, double barrel shotgun, hunting rifle. A lot of the westerny themed weapons could be found in Tilde Town, and it was a good spot to be if you wanted to get a loadout like that. And again, because it was a location where the pump shotgun would often spawn, it was a place that was contested for that reason. But again, it could be very finicky, especially when it came to that obscure radius around the location. By the next update, not too much had changed map-wise. Although the old soccer field over here got entirely flattened. It was then turned into a massive crater of sort of like the shell of an outline of where that soccer field used to be, with floating consumables that would glitch and turn into other things. Like sometimes you'd be looking at a coconut, get over there to interact with it, and it's turned into a hop rock. These were kind of cool, and if you waited around long enough, you could get the exact consumable that you needed. And it was cool to see some of the older consumable items come back. But again, if you wanted to get into a fight here, it was a massive open crater. Easy to get shot in, and it wasn't very fun to get ambushed in. When I played Season X, I was on the PlayStation because, again, at this time, my time on the PC was very buggy, very glitchy, and sometimes not even doable. So I'd play on the PS4. But I remember dropping here a couple times and just getting absolutely destroyed by somebody who had come out of Snobby. And I didn't have any weapons, stuck in this crater. They had weapons. I lost. Then the next big thing that happened, we're at Paradise Palms and Greasy Grove. Greasy came back, but instead of the old Durr Burger place, it was now a taco shop, which it still is to this day. Now, the thing here, though, is that every minute or so, while exploring Greasy, out of nowhere, you'd be forced to dance. You'd be forced to do the taco time emote. And that could be very annoying mid-fight. I'm still upset with what they did to this place. Then Moisty Palms, I know, very, very weird name, was an obscure combination of Moisty Mire and Paradise Palms, where the swamp grew into the desert and into the resort here. The gimmick here was every time you crouched, you turn into a prop. Also, the prison came back. But that was the gimmick for the new Paradise Palms. Very weird, very obscure, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Same case with the weird taco thing going on in Greasy, like, why? Oh yeah, then Tilted became Gotham City for some reason. They did a Batman collab where they added in a grappler, Batman's grappling hook, that would allow glider redeploy after you fired it. They also added in batarangs as a weapon. Those are for your the second mythic items that were added to the game. And somewhere in the desert, Pandora was added for a bit. They did a Borderlands thing where Pandora was part of the desert. The art would change into the art style of Borderlands to commemorate the launch of Borderlands 3. The drop there, the Psycho skin was released, and that was a pretty cool collaboration. And additionally, I don't know where it is right now, but the floating island returned with Kevin the Cube. It would be floating around the island. I don't know if it would show up on the map or not, but yeah, it would be moving around the map as it used to be. Instead of the middle of Loot Lake, the house at the middle of Loot Lake, the motel had been abducted by the cube and was then floating around the island. I'm trying to see if I can spot it here, but I don't see it. So, yeah, that's kind of a bare bones explanation of the map here. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. One of the main reasons why Season X wasn't so liked was the map changes and gimmicks were weird. But by far the worst thing about it all was they also vaulted a bunch of the really fun stuff. Cannons were gone, ballers were gone. A lot of weapons came and went. But the worst things of all were the mechs. I don't need to beat around the bush any longer. The brute mechs were absolutely busted when they first entered the game. They did an obscene amount of damage, fired missiles that could break through builds instantly, and could machine gun fire missiles that dealt obscene damage. It had a close range shotgun that did a lot of damage. That they could soak up a lot of health. They had a stomp attack that could break through builds immediately as well and do some serious knockback damage. And in the early stages, you could, if you stomped on trees or houses or things like that, you could farm materials by stepping on things. Yes, you heard me right. You could farm materials by stepping on stuff. They were kind of hard to counter. They did a lot of damage and could take a lot of damage. If you could get in close, if the person was in the gunner seat, because in order to effectively pilot it, you'd have to switch between the two seats, between gunner and pilot. If the person was in the gunner seat and you were able to get in close before they realized it and get into the driver's seat, you could initiate self-destruct, effectively destroying the mech, and maybe taking the person with it. However, again, the plays to get to it were kind of risky. They added in shockwave grenades again at some point during the season, and that made getting close to the mech easy. But the mech also had a jump boost thing that you could use to get away. So the mechs were not very liked. No one liked them. They were fun to use, don't get me wrong, but they were not fun to counter, and they were essentially an easy win if you got a hold of one and played your cards right. I never did. I never got a win in Season X because I didn't get a brute. I didn't play a lot during this time. I streamed a couple times and had a decent bit of fun. So I did play some solos on my own on the PS4. But my time in Fortnite at that point was very limited. So the mechs were probably the most controversial addition this season. And while they were eventually nerfed to deal a bit less damage, and they could no longer farm materials by walking over things, the damage had been done. The community was in turmoil, and not a lot of people were having a lot of fun with the game. However, another thing that people noticed throughout the season was that Dusty Depot, there was a rocket being built there. And you can see it right here on this warehouse. There was a rocket being constructed at the top of Dusty Depot. Various pieces of technology were appearing at Dusty Depot. There were some computers being set up, pieces of brute mechs navigated and migrated in, and then voice logs from a mysterious character known as the Scientist began popping up across the POI, detailing something called the Loop, the Seven, something called the Bridge, and a bunch of other weird sounding names. And then by October, the end event occurred, where the entire group of the Seven, one of the major factions in Fortnite lore, assembled to save time and space because the 0 point was about to go kablooey, which would technically end or reset existence as we know it in the entire multiverse. So the Seven restabilize the 0 point by forcing it to wipe the map, wipe the slate clean, resetting reality 0, which destroyed the entirety of the Chapter 1 map, leading us into Chapter 2. But before we get there, we have a season to actually rank. Now, I loved the Battle Pass, and the map changes here weren't terrible. A lot of fan-favorite weapons made a return during this season. However, a lot of fan-favorite vehicles also paid the price and were removed in favor of the atrocious Brute mech. The map changes were interesting, but the weird gimmicks, I didn't particularly enjoy a lot of them. And Dusty Depot and the factories weren't that big of a drawing point for me. The Battle Pass was great. Being able to use the original Bolt Sniper was great. There was also this other location called Starry Suburbs added up here. Forgot to mention that because it's the most unremembered, most forgettable Fortnite POI ever, because not because it was bad or anything, but because it was added in like literally a week or two before the chapter ended. So barely anybody got a chance to play in it. But essentially every few seconds, in this location, shooting stars would fall out the sky. You could pick them up and it would give you a random gold weapon, which also included the opportunity to get a golden TAC SMG. And again, it was gold weapons. It was pretty cool, but it only stuck around for like a week. You know, a lot of the really cool changes, a lot of the really cool gimmicks didn't stick around long enough, and so you barely got any chance to actually experience what made those actually good things good. For all of these reasons, I'm going to give Season X a C. I'm not going to fail it because I do think there were some memorable things about it that were genuinely decent or good in Season X. However, the majority was a convoluted mess. But I'm actually going to end this stream here. I just wanted to quickly get us through Chapter 1 because it had been quite a bit and we still hadn't concluded it yet. I may come back and redo parts of this stream at some point. I may actually redo some of my rankings here and talk about some stuff again in the future, but I'm sort of content with how this has turned out so far. But again, I may make some alterations next stream. I'll try to do the next part to this sooner rather than like the whole month thing that I did in between. So yeah, I'll definitely be doing this again soon, as well as getting back into the swing of regular content. But in any case, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video or live stream. Thanks for tuning in.